After my girlfriend ran away from the wedding for the third time, I chose to let go. After He Zhiyao's junior broke up our wedding for the third time, He Zhiyao still abandoned me at the wedding site for him. She said, "I'll indulge Xie Yuren this last time, can't let him lose face in front of so many people." In the evening, her junior updated his Weibo. "My heroine has run away from the wedding for the third time. A love destined by fate, no one can stop it." Chapter 1. When He Zhiyao abandoned me at the wedding site for the third time because of her junior, I took the microphone and told everyone that the wedding was off. After all, the guests who came were her relatives from this world. The one who should be embarrassed was her. He Zhiyao returned the next morning, still carrying the faint smell of alcohol. She had specially brought the Xingjian from that shop in the southern city that I loved the most, watching my expression as she said, "RCI, you saw what happened yesterday too. I really had no choice. But I promise you, this is the last time. There will be no more accidents at the next wedding." She couldn't bear to see Xie Yuren lose face in front of so many people, yet she could leave me alone at the wedding site. How ridiculous. We had been together for 7 years, and I had finally waited for her to agree to marry me. But at the wedding, she ran off with her junior who had been trying to steal me away, turning me into a joke. It was all because Xie Yuren had chased after her for 5 years, and she felt she owed him. Back in college, He Zhiyao had helped him with something trivial, and Xie Yuren fell hopelessly in love with her. He sent her breakfast every day without fail, even though he knew she had a boyfriend, still daring to confess his love. At first, He Zhiyao hated him, but later, whenever she spoke of him, there was a helpless yet affectionate smile on her lips. At the first wedding, Xie Yuren sprayed beer on my suit, ruining the carefully selected suit I wore for the day. I was so angry, but before I could speak, he ran out with red eyes, and He Zhiyao scolded me for making a big deal out of it and ran after him. At the second wedding, when He Zhiyao and I were exchanging rings, Xie Yuren suddenly fainted. The wedding turned into an emergency scene, and He Zhiyao hurriedly took him to the hospital. At the third wedding, Xie Yuren came in the groom's outfit to snatch the bride. He stood at the bottom of the stage, stubbornly lifting his head and said, "He Zhiyao, I've chased after you for 5 years, stumbling and falling every time. Every time I gathered the courage to confess my feelings, I failed. But I still want to try once more. He Zhiyao, I love you. Today, can you let me win just once?" He Zhiyao turned to look at me, her eyes flashing with a trace of struggle and guilt. "RCI, I'm sorry," she softly explained to me. "I'll indulge Xie Yuren this last time. I can't let him lose face in front of so many people." Then, she ran off the stage, grabbed Xie Yuren's hand, and with her actions, declared his victory. I watched them run hand in hand, like a scene from an idol drama. I thought I would chase after them, angrily questioning her, like I did the previous 2 times. But instead, I was strangely calm, watching them leave like an outsider. That night, Xie Yuren updated his Weibo at midnight. "My heroine has run away from the wedding for the third time. A love destined by fate, no one can stop it." The picture was of him and He Zhiyao clinking beer bottles by the sea. They looked carefree and unrestrained. When I came back to my senses, He Zhiyao pushed the Xingjian towards me, her voice gentle, coaxing. "Are you still angry? Why should I be angry? What does the next wedding have to do with me? In another month, I would be free from this world." Chapter 2. My name is Xie, and I am a strategist. The first time I met He Zhiyao, she was dazzling, like a beam of light. As the top student who was accepted into a university, she had a good family background and high looks. Wherever she went, she attracted countless gazes. So when the system told me that the person I had to pursue was her, I was initially lost, thinking it was an impossible task to accomplish. But when I thought about how, if I succeeded, I could return to my original world, wake up again, and stand and walk, even dance once more, I decided to give it my all. The system assigned me the identity of a classmate from the same year but a different major. To have more common ground with her, I attended the elective classes from her major. Before every class, I would stay up late studying those difficult and obscure physics theories. During the professor's questions, I raised my hand actively, just to leave some impression on her. But even when the professor remembered my name, He Zhiyao's gaze never lingered on me. Then, during a rural excursion, while going up the mountain for inspiration, we unexpectedly encountered a landslide. He Zhiyao was swept away by the mudslide before she had a chance to react, and I grabbed her desperately, trying to hold on. As we were being swept down the mountain, a sharp rock nearly struck her stomach. "Watch out!" I pushed her away, but the sharp rock hit my waist. In that moment, as I pushed her away, I thought, the worst that could happen is that I die in this world, my soul returning to the original world, the mission failing, and I would continue living as a vegetable. But saving a life, that would still be worth it. He Zhiyao carried me on her back, her eyes red as she ran down the mountain. Along the way, her voice was choked with emotion. "How could there be someone as foolish as you, willing to give up your life just to save someone else?" I forced a smile and teased her, "What can I say? I like you." She fell silent for a moment, not responding, only telling me to hold on. At the hospital, she took care of me meticulously until I recovered. We continued as friends for 3 years, until an incident during our senior year brought us closer. At that time, her family went bankrupt, and both her parents committed suicide, leaving behind a massive debt for He Zhiyao. She became increasingly despondent, and all her friends abandoned her. She started smoking, drinking, using alcohol to numb herself and escape the reality that was crushing her. I couldn't stand by and watch, so I held her shoulder and urged her to pull herself together. She looked at me, confusion, uncertainty, and embarrassment in her eyes. After a long pause, she bitterly smiled and pushed me away. "Why haven't you left me? Aren't you afraid I'll ask you for money?" "I'm not afraid." She froze for a moment, then suddenly hugged me tightly. Her hot tears soaked my shoulder. Later, during those most difficult days, I stayed with her, completing my studies while also starting a business. Her way of addressing me shifted from "Shenci," classmate, to "RCI." The system told me that the love value of my target had reached 100% and asked if I wanted to leave this world. I hesitated. Yes, during this mission, I had really fallen for He Zhiyao. While I was still unsure, He Zhiyao stood before the rose garden she had personally planted, a vast expanse of roses stretching across the mountain. In her dark eyes, starlight gleamed, and a blazing love flowed in her gaze. "RCI, let us be together. Let us be together for life." Meeting her burning gaze, the seed I had long buried deep in my heart sprouted at that moment. So, after completing the mission, I stayed for her. But I didn't expect that, later, when she met Xie Yuren, everything would change. Chapter 3. I'm not angry. I replied calmly, continuing to eat the Xinjiang buns. He Zhiyao seemed surprised, as if she didn't believe I would let yesterday's events slide. After all, the first 2 times, I had been upset for a long time. At first, she would patiently comfort me. Later, she would just throw a sentence at me with a cold face: "A wedding is just a formality. I'm not actually with him. Can't it just be to fulfill his wish?" Noticing my indifference, He Zhiyao pursed her lips and softened her tone a little. "Once you're done eating, I'll drive you to the office." I paused with my chopsticks, a faint bitterness rising in my chest. The car accident in my original world had left me with some post-traumatic stress, making me uneasy about driving. So, every time, I would ask He Zhiyao to drive me. I liked watching her focused side profile when she drove, liked sharing the little interesting things of the day with her. But somewhere along the way, He Zhiyao had become very busy. Busy sleeping a little longer. Busy taking Xie Yuren's dog to the pet hospital. So busy that she no longer had time to drive me. Over time, I stopped asking her to take me to work. I didn't expect that today, she would bring it up herself. I forced a self-deprecating smile, putting down my chopsticks. "No need, I've got my driver's license now." He Zhiyao's hand holding the car keys froze, and she stared at me in shock. When? Maybe it was that one time when I came back after working late, my stomach suddenly hurting badly. I took 2 painkillers, but it didn't help. The rain outside was heavy, and I couldn't get a taxi. In excruciating pain and pale-faced, I called He Zhiyao, asking her to come take me to the hospital. But after a long time, I couldn't get through. I eventually had to wait for the ambulance to come and take me to the hospital. As I lay on the stretcher, I passed by a ward. I saw Xie Yuren lying on the hospital bed, looking blissful, while He Zhiyao, sitting beside him, scolded him impatiently. "Who told you to eat so much ice when your stomach hurt? You deserve to suffer." But her hand was gently rubbing his stomach. Tears slid from the corner of my eyes to my mouth, bitter and astringent. I suddenly remembered how she had also taken care of me in the same tough love way when I was hospitalized before. I thought, maybe Xie Yuren was different in He Zhiyao's heart. After that incident, I suddenly learned not to rely on her anymore. I summoned the courage to start learning to drive again, and the moment I gripped the steering wheel and navigated through traffic, the empty sense of security in my heart finally settled. The last time my stomach acted up, I called you a lot but you didn't answer. After that, I decided to learn to drive. I answered lightly. He Zhiyao opened her mouth, but after a long pause, she couldn't say anything. She knew I had a fear of driving, but she didn't know when I had overcome it, nor did she realize when I no longer needed her. A strange sense of loss surged in my chest. I didn't pay any attention to her pale face and walked straight out the door. Chapter 4. Maybe it was out of guilt. He Zhiyao rarely cooked, but today she made a candlelit dinner herself. When she saw me return, she placed the last dish of spicy chicken wings on the table and said, "You're back? Come eat, it's all your favorite dishes." I sat down at the table, looking at all the spicy food, my stomach twinging with discomfort. She picked up a piece of chili-coated beef and placed it in my bowl. "Hurry and eat." Seeing her expectant expression, I replied, expressionless, "I don't like spicy food." He Zhiyao. She suddenly slammed her chopsticks down, frowning, her voice tinged with anger. "A wedding is just a formality. Do you really need to care so much? As long as we're together, that's all that matters." I promised Xie Yuren just because I was afraid he'd embarrass himself in front of so many people and do something foolish. "How long are you going to make a fuss about this?" The overwhelming smell of chili made me cough violently. It took a while for me to recover. I looked up at her, helplessly explaining. "I've never been able to eat spicy food." "It's because you like it that I said I could eat it too." He Zhiyao froze, and it seemed that only then did she remember that whenever I ate spicy food, I would sweat a lot and drink plenty of water. But she had never noticed this before. Her face became uncomfortable as she stared at the spicy dishes, not knowing what to do. She stumbled through an explanation. "If you don't like it, we won't eat it. I just thought you were still upset about the wedding, so I wanted to explain." I calmly agreed, "Millimeter, I understand. You just treat him like a junior." Then, I stood up to go to the kitchen and make myself a bowl of noodles. He Zhiyao looked at me with complicated eyes, her face suddenly turning pale. She stared at me for a long time, as though my reaction didn't meet her expectations, but she couldn't bring herself to lash out. After a long silence, she muttered, "As long as you know." Then she pushed the chair away and went back to the bedroom. For several days after that, He Zhiyao treated me coldly because I didn't cling to her like I used to. She waited for me to come and comfort her, as in the past whenever we had a fight, I would soften first and go comfort her. She had gotten used to it, as if it was only natural. But after deciding to leave this world, I found these past few days of her neglect to be particularly relieving. I finished all my work and made preparations to leave. My boss was reluctant to let me go, but when he saw that I had made up my mind, he asked me to take my remaining vacation days before quitting and gave me a large bonus. I bought a lot of clothes, snacks, and toys, then drove to the orphanage in the south of the city. I stood at the gate of the small park and watched the children I hadn't seen in a while. The thought that I would never see these lovely kids again made my eyes suddenly sting. This was the orphanage that He Zhiyao and I had sponsored together. When we had free time, we would come back to visit these children. As I was feeling sad, the children noticed me and immediately surrounded me. "Brother Aki, you're here to see us again, we missed you so much." "I missed you all too." Little Yaya tilted her head and looked at me, then glanced at me behind. She curiously asked, "Brother Aki, why are you alone today? Where's Sister Zhiyao?" I opened my mouth, about to speak. But He Zhiyao's voice suddenly came from behind. "Sister went to park the car. Did you miss her?" I turned around and saw He Zhiyao standing behind me, holding fruits and snacks, staring at me. After handing the things to the orphanage director, she invited us to stay for dinner. At the dinner table, perhaps because of her experience, the director seemed to sense something had happened between He Zhiyao and me. "He Zhiyao, all these years, Xiao Ci has been by your side. You've been through so much together. You should treat Xiao Ci better. Otherwise, it'll be too late to regret it." It seemed that she remembered some past events. He Zhiyao looked at me, her eyes flashing with various emotions: guilt, unease. Before leaving, she took my hand. Aki, I saw that there's a concert by your favorite singer tonight. I bought tickets. I'll go with you. Before she could finish speaking, her phone rang. She looked at the caller ID, her expression flustered, and hung up quickly. The phone rang again. He Zhiyao hesitated for a long time before finally answering. Chapter 5. Senior, I lost the dare. They said if you don't come, I have to drink a whole box of alcohol. Xie Yuren's pitiful voice came through the phone. He Zhiyao didn't agree immediately as she usually did. She looked at me hesitantly. Xie Yuren noticed her hesitation, and his voice became choked, while on the other end of the phone, the sound of men egging him on could be heard. Drink it. Come on, if you lose, you have to take the punishment. He Zhiyao clenched her fist, furious. Don't pressure him, I'll go. She hung up the phone and cautiously said, Aki, there's a bit of trouble on Xie Yuren's side. I need to go help him out. She held my hand, reassuring me, I'll be back soon. I won't miss the concert. I pulled my hand away and calmly said, go ahead. My change of heart was indirect, like watering a dead flower. It was meaningless. Thankfully, I had already stopped expecting anything from her. In the silence, He Zhiyao suddenly hugged me and then turned to leave. At 11 p.m., the concert ended. My favorite singer's final farewell concert had concluded. He Zhiyao still hadn't returned. I knew she wouldn't be back tonight. Maybe it was out of unwillingness, or perhaps anger, but I suddenly didn't want to keep enduring this any longer. Even though I could leave soon. I went to the bar they usually frequented. Upon entering, the loud music and dazzling lights almost made me forget reality. As I pushed through the bustling crowd, a cheer and uproar caught my attention. I saw Xie Yuren holding a mouthful of alcohol, leaning down to kiss He Zhiyao, who was sitting in the booth. She didn't pull away. At the moment his lips met hers, she embraced his neck and kissed him back. It felt as if my heart was torn open, cold air seeping in. As tears were about to well up, I wiped my face and walked toward them. My sudden, loud voice cut through the music, crystal clear. Almost everyone in the bar turned to look at me. He Zhiyao's face was knocked sideways, her cheek flushing red. Xie Yuren screamed and grabbed my arm, pushing me. Shenxi, what's wrong with you? Why are you hitting people? I turned around without hesitation, slapped him again. Xie Yuren was stunned, holding his face, staring at me in disbelief. He Zhiyao's dazed eyes finally began to focus. She stood up and tried to grab my hand. Aki. Hearing her call me as if nothing had happened made me feel nauseous, almost to the point of vomiting. I grabbed a bottle of alcohol from the table and poured it over her head. Watching the brown liquid drip down her hair, my anger finally started to subside. He Zhiyao, let us break up. I'll set you free. With those words, I left without looking back. I was probably just truly tired. I didn't want to be entangled with her anymore. Let her do as she wished. Chapter 6. I went back to pack my things, only taking a few clothes and some personal items. I won't need them later anyway. The moment I opened the door, I saw He Zhiyao, who came back panting. She saw the suitcase next to me and explained anxiously. Aki, things are not what you see. We were just playing truth or dare. It's just a game. Can you please not take it seriously? Everyone is playing, I can't afford to play, right? If you mind, I won't play with them next time, okay? In her words, she didn't think there was anything wrong with her behavior. If I did this, she would have been furious. The person I loved for so many years, I don't know from which moment, suddenly rotted, exuding a pungent smell. I suddenly asked, He Zhiyao, if I and Julan are like this, will you tell yourself that this is just a game? He Zhiyao was stunned. She suddenly remembered who Julan was. Before He Zhiyao and I confirmed our relationship, Julan had pursued me. On the day I rejected her, I had a meal with her. I met He Zhiyao in the restaurant, and she walked up to me with a gloomy face. She coldly asked what the relationship between me and Julan was. I looked at He Zhiyao's face becoming flustered little by little, and smiled gently. So, just lie to yourself with this kind of words. But I don't care anymore, let's break up. I didn't expect that He Zhiyao would not agree to break up. She humbly admitted that she was wrong, and repeatedly assured that the person she loved was me. I don't know what she was thinking. She obviously changed her mind a long time ago. Why did she continue to entangle and torture each other? She even moved out the group of children in the orphanage and the director's mother. I was so angry that my heart ached. I had no choice but to ignore her and treat her as air. He Zhiyao seemed to have changed her personality. She came back early every day and prepared light meals for me. She also gave me gifts in various ways. Our positions seemed to be reversed. She kept sending me messages, asking me when I would come back. She waited for my call back. No matter how late I came back, I could see her waiting in the living room with the lights on. I sighed, "No need, you should go to bed first." Her eyes were red. "How can I sleep if you don't come back so late?" The familiar words echoed in my ears, and I suddenly remembered that I said the same words when I was waiting for her at home many nights. He Zhiyao, it turns out that you also know that waiting is not pleasant. But I waited for so many years, and you waited for a few days, can't you bear it? A week passed like this. He Zhiyao seemed to think that I had calmed down. As soon as I finished taking a shower in the bathroom, she hugged me from behind, stood on tiptoes and kissed me. I pushed her away and took a few steps back. She staggered and fell on the bed after being pushed by me. Finally, she couldn't bear it anymore and exploded. "Have you had enough of making trouble? I don't understand. Nothing really happened between Xie Yu and me. Why do you have to break up with me? I have apologized to you and promised you. What else do you want?" She looked at me as if I was making trouble. In her world, as long as she and Xie Yu did not do anything substantial, it would not be considered cheating. I felt a little ridiculous, but more tired. After a while, she came over and held my hand, and softened her voice. "Okay, RCI, you said before that you hate the Cold War the most. Let's stop making trouble, okay? Let's live a good life in the future." I was silent for a long time, and finally, I agreed. I said, "Okay, delete Xie Yu and don't contact him by the end of this month, and I won't mention breaking up. The end of the month will be the day for me to leave the world. By then, it won't matter whether we break up or not." In fact, I asked the system why I had to wait a month before I could leave. The system said, "That day 7 years ago was the time you were together." I laughed dumbly. I remembered that when she confessed to me 7 years ago, we stood in front of the rose garden at the foot of the mountain and made a wish to the shooting star, to be together for a lifetime, to live, grow old, get sick and die, and never separate. Now, there is no life, old age, sickness and death, only a heart has changed. Chapter 7. He Zhiyao deleted Xie Yu in front of me without any hesitation. Even when Xie Yu found her home, she closed the door and didn't see him, and directly called the security guard to drag Xie Yu away. She began to plan our wedding by herself. "Aki, I owe you a wedding. I promise there won't be any accidents this time, trust me again." He Zhiyao set the wedding date at the end of the month, the 7th anniversary of our relationship. I think maybe it's destined. It started on that day and it will end on that day. On the wedding day, I dressed myself up carefully and put on her favorite black suit. When I came out, He Zhiyao, who was waiting at the door, brightened up. "Aki, you look so handsome today." She held my hand and walked into the wedding scene. Flowers, balloons, music. The atmosphere was just right. If Xie Yu hadn't sent me a message last night, I would really think that I would get married smoothly today. Believe it or not, you still can't get married tomorrow. He Zhiyao can only be mine. Shenxiai, you can't fight for it. So when I saw Xie Yu coming in with a knife against his neck, I was not surprised. He looked at He Zhiyao beside me with red eyes. "Why do you still want to marry him? Why can't I compare to him?" "Enough." He Zhiyao held my hand and looked at Xie Yu coldly. "Today is my wedding with Aki, I won't allow anyone to ruin it again." If she hadn't held my hand and couldn't stop shaking, I might really believe her. Unfortunately, she was lying. Xie Yu laughed bitterly, and the light in his eyes seemed to go out at once. "Okay, I'll let go, and I wish you happiness. As long as you are happy, I will die without regrets." He turned around and stumbled out. As if he had lost his will to survive, the knife in his hand accidentally cut his neck, oozing a trace of blood. "Xie Yu? Where are you going?" He Zhiyao's voice tightened, and he subconsciously called him. But Xie Yu didn't look back, and his voice was desolate. "Go to a place where I will never see you again." After that, he drove away resolutely. "Now, please ask the bride and groom to exchange rings." After the MC finished speaking, He Zhiyao's hand holding the ring trembled slightly. When she was about to put it on me, she suddenly withdrew her hand, closed her eyes in pain, and said in a hoarse voice, "Aki, I'm sorry for you, but I really can't bear to watch him die." After saying this, He Zhiyao prepared to chase Xie Yu. I grabbed her wrist. "If you abandon me again this time, you will never see me again. Are you sure you want to abandon me for the fourth time?" In fact, I don't know why I asked the question again when I knew the answer. Maybe, I want to give the self who loved her wholeheartedly in the past a seemingly happy ending. He Zhiyao paused, turned around and looked at me. The guilt in her eyes disappeared little by little, replaced by the familiar indifference. "Shenxi, you have changed. You used to be very kind, and you would be soft-hearted and bring canned food to the cats and dogs on the roadside, but now there is a living person who is going to die because of you and me. You watched it with your own eyes, and threatened me with the future. You disappoint me so much." She shook off my hand and rushed out. Chapter 8. Watching her shadow driving away quickly, I got into the car and chased after her. "System, didn't you say last time that I could choose a way to die and leave the world? I've thought about it, then I'll die on the way to chase her." I don't know what her expression would be at that time. I followed their car not far away. Until Xie Yu stopped in front of an overpass. He looked behind him and stumbled to jump under the overpass. He Zhiyao hurriedly got out of the car and chased after him, shouting at him, "Shenxi, calm down." Xie Yu's face was covered with tears. "Aren't you going to marry him? Why do you care about what I do? Just let me die." "No, I won't get married, okay?" She walked towards him little by little and hugged him tightly. And I stepped on the accelerator and ran to freedom alone. The moment I hit the railing, I closed my eyes suddenly, and with a bang, I felt that my internal organs were shifting. He Zhiyao, who was not far ahead, looked back and vaguely saw the accident. But she didn't look back, and let Xie Yu hold her face and kiss her. Just a little bit, she could see that it was my car. In fact, if she stayed for me today, maybe I would be soft-hearted and tell her the truth about leaving. But she didn't. The system was very angry in my mind. She is really hopeless. What kind of new species of scumbag is this? Then she comforted me distressedly. "Host, bear with it, I will take you home soon." He Zhiyao comforted Xie Yu and returned to the wedding scene to find me. On their way back, she heard people discussing the car accident just now. There was a car accident just over Donghuan Road. Did you see it? It was too tragic. I couldn't bear to watch it. I heard that the deceased was a groom, and he had a boutani on his suit. Yeah, it's a pity. I don't know where the bride went. Why is the groom driving alone? How sad his family would be if they knew. He Zhiyao suddenly felt a huge panic. She held the steering wheel tightly, panicking, as if something important was getting farther and farther away from her. She couldn't help but step on the accelerator, wanting to see Aki quickly. "Aki! Aki!" She looked for me everywhere before the car stopped. The guests had already dispersed, leaving only a few scattered staff members. She grabbed a staff member by the collar and asked anxiously, "Where is my husband? Where is my husband? Have you seen my husband?" The staff member was startled by her and stammered, "After you left, the groom seemed to drive to chase you." He Zhiyao's phone suddenly rang. She breathed a sigh of relief and picked it up immediately. But the next second, she was suddenly stunned. Because the call was from the hospital. "Excuse me, is this Ms. He Zhiyao?" "This is the municipal hospital." Her hand holding the phone turned pale because of excessive force, and she spoke with difficulty, "I am." There was a sudden pause on the other end of the phone. "Ms. He, please accept my condolences. Your husband Shenxi just died due to a failed rescue in a car accident." He Zhiyao was stunned in place, and the phone slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. She stared at the staff and muttered to herself, "Impossible, impossible. He is lying to me, right? He was fine just now, he was still talking to me just now." The staff suddenly pushed her away and couldn't help spitting. "It's all because of you. You left your husband and ran away with another man on the wedding day. Your husband is so unlucky to meet a scumbag like you." Under the disgusted eyes of the staff, He Zhiyao's body couldn't stop shaking. She squatted on the ground and shook her head, muttering, "No, no." It seemed that she didn't want to believe that I was dead. I looked at this scene indifferently. The system complained, "What did you do earlier?" Chapter 9. I followed He Zhiyao to the hospital. When we arrived at the door of the morgue, two young nurses passed by and said with regret, "If the groom had been sent here earlier, he might have been saved." Yes, it stands to reason that the groom had just gotten married and should have someone he couldn't let go of, but for some reason, the groom's survival consciousness has always been weak. He Zhiyao was struck by lightning. She finally confirmed that the person who had a car accident at the intersection was me. She thought that she had clearly seen it at the time, so why didn't she save him? What was she doing at that time? She was kissing Xie Yu and comforting Xie Yu gently. And all of this was seen by a CI. She was the indirect murderer who killed a CI. He Zhiyao leaned against the door of the morgue in pain, her body slid down weakly, and finally hugged her knees, curled up together, and sobbed silently. The medical staff inside saw He Zhiyao. "Are you the family member of the deceased? Come in." He Zhiyao knelt on the ground, stood up several times before standing up, stumbling over. She looked at my body covered with white cloth, her hands shaking so much that she could hardly open it. Until her nails sank into the flesh, she stabilized her wrist and opened the white cloth covering my face. In an instant, she burst into tears and cried my name heartbreakingly. "Aki! Aki! Wake up, aren't you the most afraid of cold? Let's go home, okay? Get up, let's go home. Don't ignore me, you said that we will never be separated from each other through life, sickness and death, and you can't leave me." She cried hoarsely, like a child who had made a mistake. One tear after another fell on my face. I got goosebumps all over my body. I asked the system, "Do you think she is like that histrionic personality?" "Well, a little bit, it's a disease, it needs to be treated." I hugged my arms and sighed, "When can I leave the world?" "Soon, when she gets the urn, she can leave." The system comforted. The day finally came when He Zhiyao went to get the urn. When Xie Yu saw her coming out, he hurried to follow her. "Senior sister, you finally came out, you scared me to death. How can you lock yourself in for 3 days without eating or drinking? I made soup, can you drink some first? I know you are sad that Shen Ci is gone, but it was just an accident, it has nothing to do with you, don't torture yourself." Hearing my name, He Zhiyao's bloodshot eyes finally looked at him. She suddenly raised her hand and knocked over the thermos in Xie Yu's hand, and the hot chicken soup splashed all over her. She yelled madly. "Shut up! You don't deserve to mention his name. If you hadn't forced me again and again, how could I have left our CI, and how could our CI have had a car accident because of chasing me? It's all your fault. Aren't you going to die? Why don't you die yet? Go to hell." Xie Yu screamed because of the burn, and his face turned red and white when he heard what He Zhiyao said. Finally, he ran away with red eyes. He Zhiyao seemed to have been drained of strength again, walking on the road like a zombie. The moment she got the urn, it started raining outside, and she cried loudly in the rain while holding the urn. "Aki, I was wrong, I was so wrong. I was blind, I'm sorry for you. Please come back, just treat this as a dream, please." I covered my ears and entered the channel opened by the system for me. "System, goodbye. Goodbye, host, everything will go as you wish in the future." He Zhiyao suddenly stopped crying and looked up at the sky, but there was nothing. Chapter 10. Extra from He Zhiyao's perspective. After Aki left, I spent many days in a daze, and suddenly one day, I found that everything about Aki disappeared little by little. I was panicked and desperate, and found friends who knew Aki before. They all said that I was crazy and they didn't have a friend named Aki at all. I couldn't believe it, and found the place where Aki worked before, but the people there also said that they didn't have a person named Shen Ci there. Even the children in the orphanage and the director's mother didn't remember Aki. What's wrong with this world? What's wrong? It was as if my RCI had never appeared in my life. I was devastated. In a trance, I remembered the day when I got RCI's urn. I vaguely heard RCI's voice, he was saying goodbye to something called the system. A thought that I dared not think about surged in my heart. I thought, if I could see that thing called the system, would I be able to see RCI again? I tried countless methods. I prayed to the gods and Buddhas, and asked for advice from teachers. But I never saw the system. I thought maybe it was the way of ordinary humans, and they could not see the system at all. Looking at the fruit knife in the kitchen, I suddenly had a blessing. I picked up the fruit knife and put it on my wrist, praying in my heart. "System, please, come and see me, I really miss him too much. After that, I calmly cut my wrist. Blood beads kept pouring out, and the smell of blood began to spread throughout the room. I lay down where a CI had slept before, hung my arms on the side of the bed, and slowly closed my eyes. He delivered breakfast regardless of the weather, and even though he knew she had a boyfriend, he still boldly expressed his love. And somehow, a voice sounded in my mind. I realized that this was the system that talked to Aki, and I was ecstatic. Please let me see Aki, no matter what the cost, I am willing. Even if it costs my life, are you willing? I am willing. I owe Aki a life, this is what I owe him. As their voice fell, a strong sense of dizziness came over me. When I woke up again, I seemed to have become a soul and floated to a hospital. I saw Aki doing rehabilitation training with crutches. The doctor next to him encouraged him gently, "Very good, great progress, and you will be able to recover in a while." Aki was sweating profusely from the training, and he smiled shyly when he heard the doctor's words. "Great, I can dance hip hop again." It was a satisfied smile, a smile I hadn't seen on Aki's face for a long time. Seeing what the doctor wrote in the notebook, I floated over and found out that Aki's leg was caused by a car accident while saving a child. No wonder Aki was so afraid of driving before. But my perfunctory escapes again and again forced Aki to drive again, and forced him to no longer need me. The pain was like a sharp blade that had been buried for a long time, suddenly piercing my soul. But my Aki no longer cared. He no longer cared about the fear that once made him tremble with fear, nor did he care about me who hurt him. I closed my eyes in pain, and my soul dissipated little by little, turning into bubbles until it evaporated. On the other side of the world, the news was being broadcast. Ms. He Zhiyao, the heroine who escaped from the wedding for times, committed suicide by cutting her wrists at home in the early hours of tonight. I would like to advise everyone to cherish feelings and respect life.